This is a Queen Bee Radio High School sports presentation.
Welcome to another edition of the Queen Bee Radio High School Sports Roundup. My name is Tyler Dictanis, and I hope you are staying cool during this insufferable heat wave we've had in the tri-state area. We have some football to talk about after week one. Josh Wiederholt and the gang will recap week one and preview week two, including the three big matchups we have on our Queen Bee Radio stations, two of which will be right here on the Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel. We also had the start of the volleyball season on Tuesday night. We had our first match of the season between River Ridge and Lancaster on Tuesday night, and I had a chance to talk with Mark Evenstad to preview the volleyball in the SWAL, Steve Prestegard to preview the SWC, and River Ridge head coach Dianne Langmeier previewing the Six Rivers West, as she is our guest on our One-on-One with a Great One interview presented by People's State Bank. Cross country is also getting underway this weekend. Boys soccer has already started, and we've also seen some girls golf tournaments in our area. You'll see some of those results on the shoebox scoreboard during the show on the right side of the screen later on. But before we get to all of that, let's get you this week's highlight reel. The highlight reel features big moments from the games we had on our Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel over the last week. But if you or your team weren't part of our broadcast, we still want to feature you on the show. Head on over to our website at am1590wpvl.com/sports roundup and send us the photos, videos, results, and nominate some of your favorite people from our high school sports scene to be featured on the show. Enjoy the highlight reel, and when we come back, Josh and the guys will give you part one of our football recap and preview. We'll have more after this on the Queen Bee Radio High School Sports Roundup on YouTube and SoundCloud. It's now time for this week's highlight reel.
2nd and 4 for the Cubans after that run by Dinar. Two receivers right, one left. Ball on the right hash. Richard takes the handoff, gives it to Dinar. He's running up the gut. Big hole. He's off to the races. He's inside the 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, 5. Touchdown. To the left. Richard takes a snap, hands it off to Dinar. He'll walk in. Touchdown.
And for the Cuba City touchdown.
Dinar to his right. Snap count, takes it, handoff to Dinar, running right, has a seam, cuts it back into 15, 20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown. Kale Dinar to the house again. This one from 35 yards out. 7:37 to play in the third quarter. 21-0, Cubans on top. Back to pass Stewart. Winds up wide open as Mullen makes the catch. He's inside the 10, the 5, touchdown! 38 yards to Mullins for the score. 1st and 10 for Cuba City. Back to pass. Richard rolling right, looking downfield, throws over the middle. It's intercepted. Picked off by number 57, Blake Lawrence, the kicker and linebacker for Ben Scales Mount Schulzberg with the INT. Dewar is under center. Right behind Dewar is Sanchez, which is usually where Andrews is. Back to pass Dewar. Winds up, fires over the middle. It is intercepted. Back the other way. Griffin gets the INT. He's across the 40, 45, 35, and tackled near the 30. Back-to-back turnovers, and that under center here. It is the quarterback. Richard hands it off to Dinar. Head of steam to the 5, and he just cuts through like a hot knife through butter into the end zone. Touchdown. Cuba City up, 1st and 10 at the 20 of Benton Scales Mount Schulzberg. Richard, the pass, has time, throws over the middle, has an open receiver, throws an absolute laser to Griffin for a touchdown. And 4 touchdowns for him. Hand off again to Lisk, running right, cuts it, bounces outside to the 45-40, lowers the shoulder to the 30, 25-20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown, Wyatt Lisk. Split receivers. Dewar takes a snap, pitches it outside to Mullen, cuts it back inside the 5, and is he in? Yes! Touchdown! Mullen. Parker Mullen. What a drive by the Knights, and what a finish by Parker Mullen, who pretty much did it all on that drive.
It'll actually be River Ridge serving to start the night. Reagan Zinkel, backcourt middle for the Timberwolves. And we're set for volleyball. The opening serve of the 2023 campaign, forwarded from the back middle, and Morgan set up front. The cross-court attack is going to miss the back line as those too hard by Nicole Kelly on the attack. Zinkel from the back middle. This time will punch it across. Forwarded up by Morgan. A bump set to the front left. Flat-footed spike across by Kelly is going to be forwarded back up the front line for the Wolves. The attack across by Graff. Now forward set for the Arrows. Left side attack. Popped up midcourt left. A bump set to the front left. Forwarded up by the Wolves across the net. Now a bump by Esser. Flat-footed spike across for Kelly. Forwarded from the back line and Zinkel. They'll set it up middle hitter spot. Push by Graff. A reverse bump by Morgan. 50-50 at the net. Comes down Arrow's side. A set and a spike across. Popped up midcourt for the Wolves. A forward bump. A reverse bump over the net. Forward set by Esser. And now a quick set and a left-handed tap across is going to be handled despite the good work of Cruel there. Now popped up by Morgan. Forward set, front, left. On the attack, Kelly again. Reverse bump. Forward set over the net. Quick set. Forwarded by Esser. Reverse set near side. Left-handed spike. Off the block for the kill. Megan Cruel gets Lancaster's first. Rotating in for the Arrows. Lily Weber, the senior setter. Lost last season to an ACL injury. Back here and serves across. Ball punched to the front line and down. That's going to be a kill for the Arrows. Number 5, Megan Cruel. I've got her for 2. And Kramer, who just got the kill. Backcourt middle. Alex Goki checks back in for the Wolves. Ball punched across. Popped up in the midcourt by the Arrows. Back set near side. They run a fake. They tap across. Blocked back over at the net by Shayna Graff. They'll set it back up for a bump return. Does Lancaster. The Wolves set it Krubel near side. And back over the net for the kill. The Wolves turned away rudely by Megan Cruel. As Emma Jensen comes in. Just serve backcourt middle. Arrows trying to take set 1 from River Ridge to open the season. Ball popped up by Gage. Forward set. Krubel backpedaling on the attack. Going to be dug out by Esser. They'll set it in the middle. The attack off the block. Popped up in the midcourt by Gage. Krubel tries to set. Now backpedaling attack over by Gage. Enster is there. And Lancaster takes set 1. Sets on from backcourt right. Punches across. Ball forward up to the back left. Right as you view from behind this square. The attack off the block and for the kill. That's for Hermson, and that is set number 2, 25-9. With the backcourt middle, Shayna Graff now popped up by Esser. A forward set for the Arrows. Push across, popped up by Gage. Now for Goki for Gage. Her attack off the block, popped up by Hermson. They'll forward to the far side, and they'll get the return. Goki digs, the attack by Graff. Forwarded by Morgan. Bump set forward, front left, spike off the block. Now popped up by Krubel and a forward set far side. Goki punches across. A bump for the Arrows, a digging bump, and now it's set across Graff. They'll set it across for Zinkel, who gets the kill. Service on the way by the Arrows, forwarded up by Gage. Back set far side, Wolves for Goki. It's forwarded from the back and Bergen. Now they'll set it up front left again. Tap back over the net for the kill. Reagan Zinkel brought the block up front. Ridge, Worley now backboard left. She'll punch across. Forwarded by Ball. Now to the net. The attack downward for the kill and an exclamation point. On the win for Lancaster. Ella Grunschmacher. Kill number 6. Making the set 3 final 25-14. The Arrows sweep River Ridge out of town. 25-21, 25-9, 25-14.
Hello and welcome to the football portion of episode 2 of the Queen Bee Radio High School Sports Roundup. My name is Josh Wiederholt, and I'm here with the usual suspects right now, Wally Troughton, Tom Nisus, and Scott Tolsman. We're super excited. We have football back finally. We have something to report upon. Trying to stay cool today, guys. First of all, welcome to show 2. And speaking of the Heat, now considering we have Coach Wally and Coach Scott here, how would you handle a week like this week with just the incredible heat and temperatures? And if these 100-degree temperatures hold, do you think the games will be played Friday?
Well, as a coach, it's early. School hasn't started yet, so I'd probably be bringing the boys in around 5 o'clock. And go till about 7. Try to beat the hottest time of the day. giving them a lot of breaks for water to keep them hydrated. And then maybe towards the middle of the week, like a Wednesday or Thursday, if it was going to stay hot, just bring them in for a walk through in the afternoon for about an hour so they can, kind of feel the weather. My sense, yeah, we'll still play, but I maybe move the game back an hour, play at 8 o'clock.
Hey, that makes sense to me. First of all, I think you have to start earlier in the morning. You can't have an after-school practice when you're out in this kind of a weather. The heat is just too ridiculous. And again, the hydration, you've got to pour water in these kids till it's almost squirting out all their pores. There's never enough. And I mean, even last week, I know coaches were trying to make sure the kids were hydrated, and the officials did. And I know in the Cuba City game, we saw 2 or 3 kids with severe cramps. And again, the other thing that I would be pushing and just reminding kids, as much as we all like to have our Pepsi, our Mountain Dew, or our whatever, no, ban it. Don't have it when it's hot like this in particular, unless you really want to be laying on the field with cramps, because you get that carbonation in you and it's going to lead you towards even more cramps. Some people get excited about using, Gatorade or Powerade or whatever any of those drinks might be. A little bit goes a long way. You have to be a little careful with that stuff. I've seen kids puking their guts out because they spent all their time drinking Gatorade instead of drinking water. And pour the water in all the way
Guys,
through.
the only thing I can relate to on this, this is from a farm kid. I remember 20 years ago when I was a younger man, I baled hay in 100-degree weather. And my fingers were like this from gripping the bales. This was small bales at the time. I had to grab my fingers and straighten them out. I was so cramped. And I think you guys all remember this. That's the day Corey Stringer died on the practice field as a member of the Minnesota Vikings. There have been some hard lessons learned, and fortunately we treat the dangers of heat much more seriously than years before.
Yep.
Absolutely. And that's always a good thing. Player safety comes first.
I agree. Completely.
Yep.
I think about that a little bit too when you're talking about that. I remember being in the haymow, and my dad loved wire tie bales, and anyone that knows about that knows those were the
Yes, sir.
We're talking old school here.
Yeah.
You prayed that they would be slow bringing the next load in. You could get down out of there and basically douse yourself in water and drink about a gallon because you were sweating it out like that. But I think with the idea of what would happen this week, let's just say we have this same heat going on Friday. And again, I agree with Scott. I would want the games to continue. I really think they would almost need to. But again, like I said, push the starting time back. We've played games, in warmer temperatures. We played games in the 80s. We played games even challenging 90. But again, you had ways of being able to take care of it and taking more breaks and so on. We've done that in the past, but I wouldn't put them out there in the real hot. No.
Unfortunately, the weather forecast sounds like it's going to moderate here at the end of the week. So that's good news.
And I could almost see them doing something like they did in the World Cup, where you have mandatory water breaks that aren't considered timeouts.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely all about the player safety. So
absolutely.
Well, that's what we have to be thinking about.
Jump right into our SWC coverage. Nice of you to join us, Steve. Glad you could be here.
Hi, Steve.
Glad I can be here. It'd be nice to be on time in my case, but
no
schedules.
You're always on time.
I just came from a gym where football practice was being conducted, so that kind of demonstrates what the heat effects are, at least coming into this week.
Yeah, and we were just talking about that. It's challenging. So, all right, jumping into the SWC play. Week 1 results, we saw Broadhead Judah blow out Edgerton 46-7, and they'll be hosting Evansville in week 2. That's kind of what we thought was going to happen, I would say, guys.
I think so, yeah. Broad has a pretty good team, and it's going to take a good team to play with them and beat them.
Yep. Prairie du Chien had a great game against Aquinas. They won 16-12, and they will be traveling to Darlington next week, which should be a great matchup. I think that's kind of our premier game if we were to say that we had one.
Yeah, last year Prairie du Chien lost to Aquinas. It was one of the 2 losses they began the season with before they went on their roll. And I would say that stamps Prairie du Chien is pretty legitimate, and that makes this game on Friday really big. That's going to be a very interesting game.
And what did we?
Again, if you look at it from a scouting, I was going to say, if you look at it from a scouting viewpoint, Darlington's Darlington. Darlington does what Darlington has always done. There really isn't a whole lot of difference in how they're going to line up, how they're going to approach the game, both defensively and offensively. Prairie du Chien's a different story. I mean, they change up a little bit more, and they're a different team than they were last year because, again, you're dealing with a different signal caller, and that makes a big difference with them. This is one I would not want to really predict. I kind of lean a little bit towards Prairie du Chien, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's a really tough one to call. And Steve and I covered Darlington at Platteville last week, and Darlington's defense was really, really good.
Oh, absolutely. Now, admittedly, they were playing against a first-time quarterback in Platteville's TJ Pink, but yeah, they were blitzing Platteville, and Platteville wasn't able to pick it up, and they were really stuffed Platteville's run game. Of course, Prairie, like everybody else, likes to run, or most everybody else likes to run the football. So they're going to be a real test for the first-year quarterback for Prairie du Chien, because they're going to cause, you have to think that they're going to cause Prairie problems just running the football. So then the question becomes, well, can you get guys open, and can you get your quarterback time to pass? That was something that Platteville did not have a lot of last week, and that may be what ends up deciding the game Friday night.
Scott and I were watching. Scott was doing the game. I was taking stats, the Lancaster Mineral Point game, and Mineral Point was supposed to be a very, and they still may be, very high-flying offense this year. And the question that I'd have for Wally and Scott, there's an old saying that defense is always ahead of the offense. Now, that's not always true. It's not always true in football or any sport, but would you guys say, based on what you've seen so far, that the defense is ahead of the offense here in the early season?
I would. And I was always a firm believer you build defense for a championship team, and you build everything around your defense. And, Friday night between Lancaster and Mineral Point, it was a defensive game. So I think the defense is a lot further ahead by some of the teams that I've seen scrimmage and play already this year.
I kind of always gone on an interesting philosophy. Can you score enough points to beat us? That's always been kind of my philosophy. If we put up 40 points a game, can you put up 41? And a lot of it has to do with how we play defense too. But at the same token, if you don't have good offense, I don't care how good your defense is, you're going to struggle to win the game. You need good offense. You have to find a way to put points on the board, whatever it takes. And if you could be a better running team than a throwing team, then for heaven's sakes, yeah, spend your time on the ground. You need to mix it up a little bit, but I always believe in you got to put points on the board. But is the defense ahead of offense? Definitely at the beginning of the year on newer, younger teams, somebody that's maybe new to a conference, something like that, then the defense is going to be a little bit ahead. But again, like I said, you got to put points on the board if you want to win the game. I don't care about championships. I just figure if we score more points every game than the other team, I think a championship will just show up.
Yep. And the perfect example of that is the 12-7 score, Lancaster over Mineral Point. So defenses are definitely ahead early in the season. In week 2, Lancaster will be headed to Cuba City, and that'll be broadcasted by us on WGLR, our online streaming, and live on the Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube page. And Mark and Tom will be bringing us that game. What are we looking forward to for that game?
Well, I tell you, doing some research on the game, last year, Jacob Duvall had one heck of a game against Cuba City. He had 254 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. He rushed for 152 yards with 2 touchdowns. Lancaster averaged over 7 yards per rush and held Cuba City to 2 yards on the ground in 13 carries. But last year is last year. I watched a little bit of tape, I think, of the game you guys did of Cuba City last week. I think Tyson Richard is an excellent quarterback. He had a good game, 7 for 14, 97 yards. Cale Donner, I apologize if I got his name wrong there, rushed for 132 yards and a touchdown. So Cuba City's offense looked really good as they rolled last week. But you know what? Lancaster, they had some offense too. And going to Wally's point, Nolan Wolf, he played quarterback a little bit last year, but he's relatively inexperienced. Pretty decent night, I think. Scott, 6 for 12, 140 yards and a touchdown. He also is a running threat like Richard is for Cuba City. He ran 14 times for 40 yards. Peyton Alvarado is his go-to guy in the backfield. 25 carries, 77 yards. I would think Lancaster would want to get more out of him, but Lancaster was missing one of their 2 big linemen last week in Will Busson, and the question is, will he play this week? And that would make a big difference, I think, in their ground game. But they also have some perimeter. Taylor Williams, Scott, I don't know if you remember this, 2 catches, 64 yards, and a gorgeous touchdown catch in the far side end zone. So I think it'll be a good game. Lancaster in the last 5 games have won 4 of them. Cuba City won 28-20 in 2021. It's been kind of one-sided, guys. Lancaster is averaging over 34 points a game in this series the last 5 games. Cuba only at 12.4. And I think the play of the 2 quarterbacks, and we'll see how the running backs do, it should be an interesting game.
I'm going to describe it this way, real simple. Cuba City, last year, were playing sophomores all the way across. I mean, they had some pretty good linemen, but let's face it, they were all sophomores. This year, they're juniors. To me, if you were a sophomore and you're playing now, it's like having a junior that's now a senior. You've been there, you know what's going on, you know what's happening here. That's all their skilled kids. They're all juniors. And they've been around, and they're good. What the big thing is that Guy Kopp was looking for this year were linemen. And he's found a few. And I know Benton, Scales, Mountain, Schulzberg, they were trying to run the ball. They had to run the ball wide was their only hope. And that really doesn't work really well when you've got speed out on the edge, as Cuba City does. You're going to run the ball if you're Lancaster. That's what you're going to want to do. But where are they going to run it? They're not going to run right up the middle. They're going to have to get out on the edge a little ways. And then it's a matter of, can the Cuba City linebackers match up with what's happening there? That, I think, is where you're going to the ball game right there. Because up front, Cuba's good. A lot better than they were last year. Oh, heavens, yes. And last year, they were pretty decent on defense up front. I saw some kids there that did some pretty darn good things against Benton. So,
Wally, to your point, last week, Lancaster only averaged 3.6 yards per rush against Mineral Point. They're going to need to do better than that. And as you lay out, it's going to be a tough task, but they're going to need to do better than that, I think, to win the game Friday night.
This is going to be an exciting football game. I mean, I lean a little towards Lancaster in it, but at the same token, it wouldn't surprise me to see Cuba City pull one out.
Well, Lancaster's got to clean up their game. Really, what took them out of that game and kept it close were the penalties. I mean, it took them, gave them bad positions on the field at the wrong times. So if they don't clean that up, I think Cuba City will win.
The other thing is, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know what they say, again, I defer to the coaches. You improve most between week 1 and week 2. I think I watched Lancaster scrimmage. They dropped the ball all over the field. They did not have a turnover last week. Maybe the penalties will be the focus coming into this game. So we'll see.
The only thing I'll say when you talk about turnovers in Lancaster, that has troubled Lancaster over the years more than just about any of the other better teams in this area. It's the nature of their offense. There's a little more of a high risk, and they're going to have that happen. What happened with Cuba City against Benton last week? They spent their entire time on Benton's side of the field. And that was a lot of it because of defense. So that's why I think it'll be interesting.
Absolutely will be a great matchup, and we're happy to have it on our Queen Bee Radio Sports Network on WGLR and on our streaming and our YouTube page. Brought up earlier, Steve and I covered the Platteville-Darlington game. Darlington won 34-7. The Hillmen will be hosting a second consecutive SWAL team next week, again at Pioneer Stadium in Platteville as they take on Mineral Point. Have any thoughts on that game, Steve?
Well, there's a phrase in the NFL that nobody wants to go 0-2. Now, that's not really as important in high school because these are non-conference games and your playoff position is determined by what your conference record is. So, it's not quite a similar situation to that. But having said that, neither of these teams wants to go to 0-2 anyway. But that could happen. That is what's going to happen to the loser. The other thing, of course, is these two teams, Platteville and Mineral Point, want to score more than one touchdown. That's all they managed to do last week. Platteville's thing was, if you remember, Josh, that they moved the ball all right, but they couldn't finish. And they had two turnovers. There were actually 3 Darlington turnovers. They only scored on one of them, and that was when the ball was fumbled at the 15-yard line. Yep. They had 2 other opportunities that Darlington's inability to keep the ball off the ground gave them, but they weren't able to take advantage of it. And then they just kind of got worn down in the second half. So the offense needs to finish this week in Platteville. And I think that the Mineral Point situation is possibly similar to that. They were not able to run the ball very well at all against Lancaster. And I think they're probably going to try to do that more successfully than they did last week.
Yep, and I agree. Platteville, the score line wasn't super indicative of how the game went, but it was 14-7 at the half. And they showed some flashes with some individual players. I mean, with that amount of pressure and only throwing 1 interception was great. Darlington defense was just tough. So, yeah, that'll be a really good matchup that we'll be covering on Extreme 107. And just informed, we won't be streaming that, but it will be on our SoundCloud.
One of the things I did notice that's interesting, going over stats and then talking to a couple of Platteville parents and talking to a couple of coaches too, I think Platteville might be the most improved team in the conference. They might be. Yeah, they lost a good quarterback, but I think they're better at most of their other positions, which is part of it. They don't run the ball as well as they would like. And of course, you lost probably one of the best linemen, maybe one of the better linemen in the conference from last year. But still, he threw the ball well. He had a lot of completions. He only had 1 pick. I think I'd be a little careful, and I would make certain I'm going to probably put as much pressure on him as I possibly can, But don't forget, because they do have a running back that's not that bad. Don't give him a chance.
Yep. And that one interception you bring up too, I got to give a shout out to the 6'7" Darlington free safety, Eli Murray. That was quite the sight. And there was a ball down the sideline that he covered the entire half the field and made a great play down at the 2.
Wally will appreciate this. Wally will appreciate this phrase, because we've used the phrase before, or everybody's heard it: offense wins games, defense wins championships. Well, Bud Grant, who was the longtime coach of the Minnesota Vikings, 4 Super Bowl trips, had a better phrase, which is defense wins games, offense sells tickets. So you asked the question of our teams, is the defense ahead of the offense? Well, the teams that play the best defense are the teams that are playing when the weather's a whole lot colder than this in November. Keep that in mind.
Yep, for sure. Rounding out the SWC slate, we had a game that we also covered, Dodgeville 6, Viroqua 48. And Dodgeville will look to get on the board this week at Peck Argyle. Thoughts on that one?
I think Dodgeville will be favored.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, Dodgeville's young. They're rebuilding a little bit. They lost some good kids from last year. It's on their field. And I really don't think, unless they make a lot of mistakes, I don't think Peck is just good enough yet to play with them.
I agree.
And then to round things out, we had Richland Center falling to Westby 17-52, and they will host Fenimore. Fenimore's coming off a 1-0 record, beating Iowa Grant. Thoughts on that game?
That was an interesting thing last week, because let's just say Fenimore didn't have a great couple of weeks before the milk can game, because of course they had the news broke about a week ago about their probation with the WIAA, and before that they had some controversy because of a bunch of players from last year's team that decided not to go out for football this year. And I think probably a lot of people thought, well, Fenimore's not going to do anything this year. I think they surprised a lot of people playing an Iowa Grant team that had, was getting some preseason votes, believe it or not, in the polls. So it's possible that the demise of Fenimore football, at least for this season, is exaggerated. Richland Center's kind of not picked to do very much this year. And this is a rivalry, a non-conference rivalry that's been going on for quite some time. So, maybe Fenimore is better than people thought they were going to be, and we'll find that out this week.
Josh and the guys will be back in a bit to recap and preview the area's high school football games. But when we come back, we're going to switch gears and turn our attention to the high school volleyball scene. I'll be joined by Mark Evenstad, Steve Prestigard, and River Ridge Volleyball head coach Dianne Langmeier for a preview of the 2023 volleyball season. The Queen Bee Radio High School Sports Roundup continues after this on YouTube and SoundCloud.
Grow your business by enhancing your digital marketing efforts with Queen Bee Radio and Phase 3 Digital. We provide customized solutions based on your business's unique needs, including targeted advertising, website development, and search engine optimization. Contact us at 608-349-2000 or visit p3da.com/Platteville to learn more.
Back on the Queen Bee Radio High School Sports Roundup, I'm now joined by Mark Evenstad, going to help us go over the SWAL volleyball preview this season. And Shark, Mineral Point coming away with the conference last year. Cuba City, traditionally a dominant team in the SWAL, but Mineral Point coming away with an 11-1 conference record. Cuba City finishing 9-3, but it looks like Mineral Point has a bunch of graduates and making way for Cuba City to make a run back in it.
Yeah, it was very, very competitive last year in the SWAL conference, and it was kind of a two-team race for a number of years with Cuba City and Mineral Point, but now Darlington joined the fray last year, and don't be surprised if Southwestern, another team that had a few good years there about 10 years ago, you could look out for them too. They could join the fray. They were 8-4 in conference last year, 18-9 overall. So don't be surprised if Southwestern gets in there as well. And then all of those, with the exception of Southwestern, kind of played a role in how the postseason turned out in the regional and sectional round.
If you recall last year, in addition to Mineral Point and Cuba City's success, Darlington upset River Ridge, who was undefeated in that regional semifinal round, and they seemed to get hot towards the end of the season. Darlington knocking off Cuba City, but yeah, that's a very very tough conference. What are some of the storylines and things that you're kind of have your eye on as you head into this season?
Well, of course, what had happened last year, Tyler, we get to the regional semifinal round, and that is where New Glarus knocked out Cuba City. New Glarus had an outstanding team last year. And then you had the upset of Darlington taking out previously undefeated River Ridge. And you had Mineral Point, the number 2 seed, taking out the number 7 seed, Viroqua. What that set up then, New Glarus moved on, and then Darlington faced Mineral Point, and Mineral Point won that in 3 sets, 25-17, 30-28, and 25-13. That then set up Mineral Point, the number 2 seed, facing the number 1 seed, Broadhead. And Broadhead took out the Mineral Point Pointers 26-21, 26-24, and 25-15. So you can see where those schools are bunched up. And I would not be surprised if we're in that same boat next year, and maybe a few of those teams might even go beyond that. That wouldn't surprise me one bit.
Yep. And who are some of the key returners that you kind of have your eye on heading into the season?
Well, as I mentioned Southwestern before, they do have Dianne Langmeier back this season, so they could build upon those 18 wins that they had last year. Cuba City, they'll have 2 all-conference performers back, Ella Vosberg, Lainey Rundy. Darlington has 3 returners, Jaden Evenstad, Aubrey McCarthy, and Zoe Zuberbuehler. And Mineral Point, even though they graduated a whole lot, they do have Malia Ashelman. She'll be back this year as well. So it's going to be another rough and tumble SWAL conference this year.
Yeah, the SWAL is very well represented, and they're very competitive, especially when it comes time to the tournament. And as we would expect, the season's going to be highly competitive and should make for a very interesting 2023 season. This one-on-one with the Great One interview is presented by People's State Bank.
Looking for a checking account with no monthly requirements or service charge? People's State Bank's People's Checking Account is just what you're looking for. This account includes free debit card, online and mobile banking, bill pay, and much more at no cost to you. You heard that right. No cost to you. We're your local community bank ready to serve you. People's State Bank, member FDIC.
Welcome back to the Queen Bee Radio High School Sports Roundup. It's time for us to go one-on-one with a great one, presented by People's State Bank, and we definitely have a great one with us this week. She is the head coach of the River Ridge girls volleyball team, entering her 18th season leading the program and coming off an undefeated regular season in 2022. Our guest is Dianne Langmeier. Coach, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Tyler.
Absolutely. The beginning of any season is always exciting, and each season and preseason is a little different from year to year. But are there any particular things about the start of each season that you look forward to the most when volleyball comes around?
Oh, it's just the great athletes that we have keep coming back every year. And I guess this year I'm really excited to have my daughter, Taylor Langmeier, back in the gym as a coach with me. So that's what we're really excited about. And the girls, I'm coaching 2 of my starters are girls. I probably coached their moms. So it's just the kids. That's why we keep coming back, because they're great kids, and we just love to share our love and passion for the game with them.
As you mentioned, this is the 18th year you're leading the River Ridge Timberwolves. Take us through your coaching journey. Where did the love of volleyball first start? Where did the interest in coaching begin? And what motivates you to come back year after year?
Wow. Well, it started back at West Grand High School as a freshman, but way back when. I think we were able to win conference championships, and it was like a Black Hawk Conference back then. Went off to college, came back, did a JV job under Jeff Gravine, and then I took over the varsity at West Grant, and I think Reagan Zinkel's mom was on the team when we won conference champs then. I did get a job over at Fenimore, so I went over there and coached 3 years there. Then I got busy with kids, so I got out of it for about 10 years. And then they were looking for a coach when my oldest was about 6th grade. So I got into the middle school a little bit, and then the varsity opened up. And so 18 years ago, and we were like the second from the bottom in the conference my first year. And I was like, oh, I want to get that conference championship back. And we've been lucky to get some conference championships and some regional championships, and even a trip to state along the way. So it's been an amazing journey, and it's just it's really awesome coaching these girls, and a lot of the parents, I've coached parents and their daughters now. So it's just like a coaching family now.
Yeah, your team did go to state in 2018, like you said, which I'm sure if it's not the proudest moment, it definitely is one of them. But what are some of the other accomplishments that you have that are near and dear to you that maybe some other people may not be aware of?
I think one of the biggest ones is a few years back when we made it the game before state, and we lost a lot. And then the next year we were able to pull it together and win conference. And so, hey, that's what we're going for this year. Again, we won conference last year, and we're down to only 2 starters on that team. But it'd be really awesome to come back and able to put together something, because right now we're like looking at a freshman as a setter, a hitter. And actually it's kind of fun because that's Mallory Krubel is one of our friends. We're going to go with the 6'2", and she's a setter and a hitter. And her mom, Andrea Krubel, was on the first team for River Ridge when they became a school. They won the regional championship. So it's kind of neat to see what Andrea's daughter can do in her high school career. And you've heard of her 2 older brothers that are great athletes. So right. Yeah. And then Reagan Zinkel is another going to be a great player coming on. Shayna Graff is our only senior that's in the starting lineup now. She's really become a great leader. Josie Drone, her older brothers you've heard of too. She's a sophomore. She's going to be our other setter, and she can also hit all the way around. And then we have another sophomore, Elena Gage, that kind of over the weekend we decided, okay, you're going to be our libero. So we've got like 2 sophomores and a freshman starting. So it's going to be I've never had that many young players. So it'd be really neat to pull together something. And that would be a proud moment if we could pull together something and do something. Because this year the conference is wide open, I think. So.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be that way. The conference seems to be, kind of a bit in flux. It's, kind of been the last couple of years, River Ridge, Highland, and Potosi, although last year Potosi, not as successful in the conference last year. But when you kind of think about the the Six Rivers West as a whole, I mean, this has been a very competitive conference, year in and year out. What is it that stands out about the Six Rivers West in particular in your experience that kind of sets this conference apart from maybe some of the other ones in the area?
It's a lot of coaches. Like Russ Ham was at Benton for years, and they went to state, and then he got out of coaching, but now he's back at Schulzberg, and he's going to get a lot out of those girls, so they're going to be tough. And then Maria Winiski's been coaching over at Highland, and she's taken teams to state. They won state way back when, and she's a great coach. So, I just think we also have great athletes and great sportsmanship. And that's what I really love about it, is that we all play each other, but we all respect each other too.
Yeah, it seems really cool, especially, last year, with your, husband going through surgery and stuff like that. I saw a lot of the social media posts about, how all the other teams in the area were supporting you. And it does seem like a very cool family type of environment, and, almost a sorority fraternity, type of environment amongst the coaches, especially in the volleyball side.
Yes, it really does. And that support really means the world when you have those dark days. It really does help. So fortunately, my husband, everybody's always asking. He's had a couple three stable scans, so things are good right now. So yes, so I mean that's why I'm able to sit here and coach and have my daughter alongside me if I have to go to an appointment here or there. When we're on the court, we're very competitive. Yet in the end, we all support each other too, especially when another team does well and go to state or whatever. And we also have something that's really neat at the end of the year that not a lot of conferences do, is the senior showdown. And that's really cool. We've had a lot of great feedback from that, where the top 2 teams in the conference, their coaches coach the all conference player seniors and against the Six Rivers East. And it's just a really fun night. And we raise some money for the Madison Children's Hospital. And it's a great way to have the girls, they've been on the court opposite each other to come together and be on the same team. It's kind of leaves some great memories for them too, and us coaches too, and we've gotten to know each other through that experience as well.
Yeah, nice having a little bit of bragging rights, types of stuff too, amongst the Six Rivers teams as well. It's a really cool thing and a really cool way to raise some money. I saw that over the summer, the post about it. It's a really cool thing that that happens in volleyball.
Yes.
Right. And like we talked about, last year, the team went, undefeated during the regular season, ended up with a 3 seed in the tournament, got through Iowa Grant in the regional quarterfinal, and then your team lost to Darlington. But the thing that I really remembered the most was what was kind of going on in your world personally around that timeline? As we mentioned earlier, your husband Tom had been diagnosed with cancer and was actually having surgery the very next day after that match was done. I'm sure that time frame is still kind of a bit of a blur, when you look back on it. But how are you able to balance preparing your girls for postseason play while also trying to manage, the really scary and unknown aspect of your
well,
husband's
volleyball
health?
is that kind of, when it's kind of nice not to have to think about the cancer and all that sometimes too. Sometimes when you're on the court, then you can think about something else. So that's really, a balance in your life is really important too. But yeah, I really felt that it was nice that Darlington, that before the game, they gave us flowers when we played them that night, and the support from the community and all around was really helped us get through that time. And unfortunately, my husband's doing well right now. He's had three stable scans, and that's great for now. But then that's why my daughter is coming and helping me coach now, because then if one of us has to go for an appointment, then the other one will be there. And last year, I have to say, Megan Copsey, Mackenzie Stegman, they both stepped it up big time as my assistant coaches and helped us out in that time when I needed to be at the hospital with him. So I couldn't have done it without them too.
Yeah, all good news. Happy to hear that Tom is doing well, and hopefully everything continues to stay that way. And
Yes.
This is another little tidbit that's a bit unique to you, is that you coach at River Ridge, but you also teach at Fenimore.
Yes.
Which do you own more memorabilia for? Do you own more for River Ridge, or do you own more for Fenimore?
Boy, that's really tough. But man, my closet is full of both. That's for sure. And my love for both schools is there. Both schools, I just really have a lot of support. So it really makes it hard when you do play against those girls, but you still find a way to root for both teams.
Yeah. There's no weird smirks or anything if you end up wearing River Ridge stuff, to work.
Oh yeah. Actually, I do it all the time on game day. They know, and they become my fans too, because especially my kids in my class, because if we win, they might get treats or something. So they're River Ridge, become River Ridge fans too.
So looking ahead to this year, you lose 6 seniors to graduation. Of course, Peyton Millen, Conference Player of the Year. We kind of talked about, some of the returners that you have coming back. But what are some of the expectations? What are some of the things that you've seen from your team in the first week of the preseason, heading into week number 1?
Well, over the weekend of the scrimmage, we were really still just trying to figure out who's going to go where. And we've got a lot of great talent. They say that every team is as strong as their weakest player. And we really just don't have any weak players this year. It's going to take everybody. And I told them that all the girls that, if somebody's not having a good night, then somebody else might be stepping up that night. We might be changing the lineup. And I don't usually do that too much during the year. But this year might be one of those years where we may change it throughout the year because they're all pretty evenly talented, and they're just kind of pushing each other. And although they are pushing each other for spots, they also are having great team chemistry. I feel like we went up to the team camp at Eau Claire this summer, and they're hard workers. I think we average like about 5'8", 5'9". We're going to do a 6'2", so we'll hopefully have some blocking going on. For last year when I did the 5'1", Allie Wagner was an awesome setter, but we kind of lost out on the blocking there when she was so short. So hopefully this year we can always have 2 or 3 blockers up front. We got to work on our consistency and our hitting, and I think they are improving on that. Also, we lost Olivia Plana, a great libero, and so we're filling in, with our back row and trying to get some good serve receive. So we're working on that. That's probably our weakness right now. We're trying to get better at that and digging. But the girls are coming together and got a lot of players fighting for spots. And we did kind of think, I think we figured out a little bit more of our consistency over the weekend of who's going to go where. So that helps.
Yep. Any pleasant surprises from some of the returners coming back? Any, progression or anything that kind of stood out to you?
Yes. Shayna Graff has really she's always been the silent assassin on that right side, but now she can play all the way across the front, and she's just a strong player. She's put in her time over the years. She's got a floor captain, great basketball player, great volleyball player, great leader. She's shown great leadership. She's going to be a force to reckon with in the conference, I believe. And Reagan Zinkel is really coming on with her hitting and stuff. Watch out for her this year too. And she's really become a great back row player too. So, and we got Haley Kramer is coming in as a junior, and she's got a great serve, and she's going to see some time. Alex Goki, they're both kind of vying for a spot. And then on the right side, senior Brooklyn Mesra and Maya Drone are kind of vying for a right side spot. Josie Drone is little sophomore. She's been with us all summer. She's real strong in the open, put in a lot of time in the open gyms and at team camp. Nobody really wanted to be setter, and she really didn't want to either, but she is really stepping into the role as a great setter and an outside hitter. She's not very tall, but I said, you don't have to be tall to hit the ball. And she wants to be a hitter. So she's always working hard at her hitting. So you'll see her on the court a lot. And then Mandy Worley is also really great DS that's been putting a lot of time and effort. And Avery Drew is another one. All three of my seniors are captains: Avery Drew, Brooklyn Mesera, and Shayna Graff. They've put in a lot of time and effort and in the summers, and they're showing great leadership to the other younger girls. So I appreciate all their efforts.
Yeah, but the final question, I've, started getting involved in, calling volleyball the last couple of years. And one of the things that's really stood out to me is how intense some of these, matches can be, especially, with the rally scoring and, especially with, the Wisconsin Badgers winning the national championship in volleyball. It seems like, the state of volleyball, in the state of Wisconsin, and particularly in Southwest Wisconsin, is very strong. How do you kind of quantify the growth of, volleyball, around this area? And what are some of the things that kind of stand out about, volleyball around here as far as the popularity, the numbers for the girls that come out for it? It does seem like it's growing, and it's become like one of the primary, if not the primary sport for a lot of these girls in our area.
Right. It is really neat to see. And I've taken a few teams up to the Badger camps a few years, and it's really neat to see them do well. And I think that a lot of our girls like to go up and cheer them on. And then when they see them play, it kind of elevates our game out here too. And they, we talk about the Badgers and things that they do. And we are really fortunate to have Megan Awe that is an alumni from River Ridge, but she comes back and does a camp for us, and she goes and she coaches at the Badger camps and stuff. So she brings all sorts of ideas and her knowledge for the game back to help us and stuff. And it's neat to see a lot of the girls and the teams in the area play club ball. I think that's really elevated a lot of the play for the teams in the area too. So it's neat to see. And it's neat to see guys come and say, hey, I didn't really understand the game before, but it's really exciting. It's intense. So it's kind of neat to see that.
Yeah, good luck to your team. Good luck during the season. We're looking forward to following River Ridge and all of high school volleyball across our area. Thank you very much for joining us, Coach.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. That's head coach Dianne Langmeier of the River Ridge Timberwolves. We'll have more on the High School Sports Roundup after this on YouTube and SoundCloud.
Looking for a checking account with no monthly requirements or service charge? People's State Bank's People's Checking Account is just what you're looking for. This account includes free debit card, online and mobile banking, bill pay, and much more at no cost to you. You heard that right. No cost to you. We're your local community bank ready to serve you. People's State Bank. Member FDIC.
Back on the Queen Bee Radio High School Sports Roundup, it's now time to preview the SWC volleyball season for 2023. And I'm now joined by Steve Prestegard, who has his fingers on the pulse of the SWC volleyball scene. And Steve, we talked about this during the football preview about the SWC being a weird conference. It seemed to be the same for volleyball, where you have Dodgeville and River Valley co-champions, but with 7-3 conference records, and then Richland Center and Platteville 6-4 conference records. 4 teams all within striking distance of getting the conference title. That either says that the conference is really competitive, or that the conference might be a bit on the not so competitive side. So I guess from your vantage point, what are kind of the things that you look at when you reflect on the 2022 season with the SWC? What kind of stands out to you about it?
Well, for one thing, the kind of the breakout team last year was probably Dodgeville, because they went 26-4. But again, they were 7-3 in the conference, so they dominated everybody that they played outside of the conference, basically. But it was a pretty even year in the conference when you have 2 7-3 teams and 2 6-4 teams. But the team that was the last team standing in the conference was Platteville. And I think one thing about that is that kind of demonstrates that Platteville is really the most consistent program there is in the conference year in and year out. They're the team that has won more conference titles, always seems to be at or near the top of the conference, and also a team that makes postseason something that's not just a one and done. One of the reasons for that is that Platteville is typically the team or maybe one of the 2 or 3 top teams that plays the most matches. Keep in mind that in volleyball, the every match counts as one match. You get 15 total, but in the weekend tournaments, which everybody's about to start in, those only count as one match per day. So if, for instance, you're in a 2-team or a 2-day invitational like Whitewater or Onalaska or somebody like that, you play pool play one day, you play a bunch of matches. Those only count as one match. And then you play in the brackets the next day, and those only count as one match. Platteville played 40 matches last year, and the only way you get better is to play more. And that, I think, is the reason that consistently over the seasons, Platteville ends up being the most consistently good program in the SWC.
Yep, and with those 4 teams kind of being bottlenecked, at the top, which teams are going to be losing, some of their players due to graduation, and which ones do you think might end up being kind of the front runners heading into 2023?
Well, that's the thing with Platteville, unfortunately, this year is they lose almost all of their hitters from last season. And if you look at the all-conference list from last year, the vast majority of them are seniors. There's a junior here and a couple of sophomores there from last season. And so as a result of that, I think that Dodgeville thus becomes the team to beat because they have more players coming back than anybody else from among the top players in the conference, like Ava Garthwaite in the middle and also able to be a setter, like Marley Bush, who will be a senior this year, like Riley Forsyth and Lily Weigel. Both of them are up front players. Those 4 coming back, I think my count is right. Those 4 coming back is more than anybody else has by far in the list. Platteville's got 1 back, Jackson Burnchin. River Valley, I don't think they have. Actually, Richland Center has 1 coming back in McKenna Monson. But everybody else, they're going to have to develop them during the season. And so that, I think, makes Dodgeville the team to be in the conference. The other thing, if you want to look at it as an intangible, Dodgeville did not go as far, I think, as they thought they were going to in the postseason. And when you have a young team, that's the sort of thing that happens. You have a great regular season, but postseason volleyball is not the same thing as regular season. And so that could be, from the intangible perspective, that could be the sort of thing that could propel Dodgeville this year as something to play for, not just to dominate in the regular season, which a 26-4 team certainly did, but to be around deep into the postseason, which they did not do last season.
Yeah, it should make for a very competitive SWC conference this upcoming year, and those head-to-head matchups between Dodgeville and Platteville, those are going to be some barn burner type matchups as we look at those 2023 individual matchups. And these teams might run into each other in various tournaments throughout the season as well. Should make for a very compelling 2023 season in the SWC.
Well, for one, and keep in mind also that with the exception of Lancaster, which isn't in Division II, they will face each other in one sense or another in the postseason. And you've heard that phrase, it's tough to beat a team 3 times in a season. Well, in Platteville's case last year, they played River Valley at River Valley. This is a place that kind of weirdly, Platteville's played quite well in the postseason. And in fact, that's what happened last year. Platteville went to Valley. Valley was a conference co-champion, but Valley ended up going home for the year after that, and Platteville moved on. And again, I think that's why you can't discount Dodgeville, or can't discount Platteville, even if they have a lot of people that they have to replace, because they've got, despite the fact that they've had, believe it or not, 4 head coaches over the past decade, but every year they play, it seems, deep into the postseason. And that match, all the matches that they play during the regular season has a difference, makes a difference. But it's also, I think, simply kind of the institutional memory of, yeah, we went to state 3 years ago. Yeah, we played deep into the postseason, 2 years ago. Last year they got into the sectionals, which means that regardless of what your regular season record was, and theirs wasn't that great, but they still end up as one of the top 16 teams in Division II because they got out of the regional. So it's what happens in the regular season and what happens in the postseason may not be the same thing this year.
Yep, it's always interesting once we get into the postseason, those matchups, and it seems to be, which team gets hot at the right time. And, it seems like, Platteville's always in that right spot where they need to be in playing their best volleyball heading into the postseason, which is what any coach in any program wants to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you ask, coaches like conference titles because you put them up on the wall. But, the years that Platteville went to state, 2014 and then 2020, I think they tend to like those, more than perhaps in conference titles. I think the players really do too. And it's, really, they're two different seasons because the regular season is a marathon. But in order to get to state, you have to win 4 straight matches. And they could be against teams that you've played before. But then you start getting into the sectional round, and these are teams you have not played before. And that's what makes it really fun, as a matter of fact, is, the idea of, in Platteville's case, with a very senior-dominated team last year, knowing that everybody is done with their careers if they lose. That sort of pressure focuses the mind.
Yep, it definitely does. And, as we said, the SWC should be a very compelling conference to keep our eyes on. Thanks very much, Steve, for your insight.
Glad to join you.
Grow your business by enhancing your digital marketing efforts with Queen Bee Radio and Phase 3 Digital. We provide customized solutions based on your business's unique needs, including targeted advertising, website development, and search engine optimization. Contact us at 608-349-2000 or visit p3da.com/Platteville to learn more.
All right, moving on to the SWAL. Some really good surprises and some not so good surprises in week 1 at the SWAL. We mentioned earlier Darlington's defense really took over the game and had a great second half against Platteville, winning 34-7. And they'll host Prairie du Chien. The 76-player Cuba City team really handled Benton Scalesville Shullsburg, and it's Cale Donar, not Donar. He ended up with 120 yards and 4 touchdowns, and the Cubans will travel to Lancaster and WGLR. Fenimore, led by junior quarterback Ethan Scheckler and senior running back Trenton Hill, took down Iowa Grant, as we mentioned, in the Melcane game, 30-12. Another game that really wasn't decided until the second half. Fenimore travels to Richland Center. Belleville fell 28-37 to Waiawega Fremont in a game that, in my prediction, some really explosive offenses, and Belmont is still a team to look out for, in my opinion. They'll host New Glarus Monticello in week 2, and then the Mineral Point lost 7-12 against Lancaster, as we discussed earlier, and they'll be visiting Pioneer Stadium on Extreme 107 this weekend. And finally, Parkview Albany got on the board, scored 11 points and losing 33-11 to Fall River Rio, and they will host Dodgeland this Friday. There were some surprises, good and bad, but we covered the Darlington game, Steve. I think that's kind of Darlington defense, as they are who we thought they were.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing to keep in mind with Darlington also is they're missing one of their players. Roger Volkening had a broken fibula, so his return is not known. So they didn't even have a full complement of players, and they still, gave up 1 touchdown on a 15-yard drive after a turnover. I have to think that Darlington defense is one of the best in the area, at least, would be my guess. And certainly Prairie du Chien is going to have its hands full trying to score in that game.
Absolutely. Yep. And the way we are still in non-conference, so we covered a lot of the matchups in our SWC section. So if anyone jumped to the SWAL section, they can head back to the beginning of the video and get our preview for those games. Moving on to the Six Rivers. Six Rivers, again, we're blessed with so many good football conferences in this area. In week 1 play, Potosi-Cassville kind of showed us they are who we thought they were. Beat Wazeeka-Seneca 35-0. Eli Adams with 3 touchdowns on 8 carries. And they'll host Ithaca and Potosi. Thoughts on that coming game?
Well, you know, Wazeeka-Seneca is supposed to be one of the better teams in the Ridge and Valley Conference, and they couldn't score. Ithaca is supposed to be one of the better teams in the Ridge and Valley Conference. Now, admittedly, they played, when we get to that, a very tough team, but Ithaca might have the same problem that Wazeeka-Seneca has. You know, nobody's very deep in Division 7 football, but when you have the people coming back that Potosi-Cassville does, first off, if you have your running backs coming back, your life is very good. And that also allows you the opportunity to bring your new quarterback along slower than you might otherwise have to. He only threw 4 passes last week, happened to complete 3, and he had, I think, 160 or so yards, or something over 100 yards in pass yardage. So Potosi-Cassville looks very good right now, and they look like maybe one of the candidates that might be playing pretty deep this season.
I would agree. I mean, I looked a little bit at some film on Potosi-Cassville. They're good. There's no getting around it. And anytime you've got numbers, chances of you being good are pretty good. And we can talk about how good some teams are up in the Ridge and Valley, but the Ridge and Valley traditionally has struggled, particularly against Six Rivers schools. Traditionally, that's the way it's been. I see the game, this game turning out pretty much for Potosi-Cassville like the game did last week.
Next on the slate, it is River Ridge won their game in the 4th quarter, and we kind of discussed on the first show the crazy Highland atmosphere. They were able to eke one out at the end of the game, won 14-7. And they will be hosting Wazeeka-Seneca on Super Hits 106 on Friday. And that one will be covered by Wally and Tyler. Thoughts on the River Ridge team this year so far?
I think they're good. I mean, are they? I'm not so sure they're at the level of Potosi-Cassville. We'll find out this week. But I think they're pretty darn good. And, I mean, I'm expecting River Ridge to handle this Friday night. I really am. The Blue Golds are one of the better teams in that conference, but River Ridge is one of the better teams in the Six Rivers. And again, like I said before, Six Rivers has dominated the Ridge and Valley for years. It'll continue.
Yeah, we keep one other thing in mind, which is that, you know, last week's Wazeeka-Seneca game against Potosi-Cassville, and this week's game against River Ridge, those are previews for next season, because next season, of course, what's left of the Ridge and Valley is going to be merged into the Six Rivers Conference. So, you know, Wazeeka-Seneca was kind of dominating the Ridge and Valley for a while, and those days might be over in the new conference for them next year.
Yeah, that's a buzzsaw start to the football season when you know, if you're Wazeeka-Seneca and you face the presumptive top 2 teams in the Six Rivers, it's like, welcome to high school football in 2023, because they got quite
the only way it could be worse for them is if next week they had Blackhawk Warren.
yeah. Do they? Have you checked? Because boy, that would be really unfortunate.
No, fortunately for them, no. They go in the conference.
Speaking of Blackhawk Warren, in week 1, handed a little insult to injury to North Fond du Lac, who had to travel all the way to Blackhawk High School to get beat 52-8. Blackhawk Warren will play host to Highland in Warren in week 2, and I think that's going to be a pretty good football game. I don't know about you guys.
I think so.
based on how close the River Ridge game is, Highland might be a little better than people thought, although they have been considered a favorite in the Ridge and Valley. And, Blackhawk Warren is a horribly difficult team to play because of the offense that they play. You talk about how physical all the Six Rivers teams are. They're probably number one on that score. There's literally nothing fancy about what they do, the Veer offense. And, they're not that many different plays, but they smack you around and it's like, here, stop this. And one reason that Blackhawk Warren has always made these deep runs into the playoffs the past several years is, for one thing, hardly anybody plays that offense. So kind of similar to when Lancaster was getting good with the wishbone, it's difficult to prepare for something that you don't see very much. And then obviously the tradition of Blackhawk Warren is just, tremendously physical football. And that's the challenge that Highland's going to be facing this week.
Yes, who else plays real physical football? Highland. So that's why that kind of evens up a little bit. The difference I see here is the fact that traditionally Blackhawk Warren has had better linemen than you found, at least more of them than you find up in Highland. And that's one of the things that makes it different. And again, let's face it, Blackhawk Warren's gone through a string of some pretty doggone good running backs. We'll see where they are as this year progresses.
Absolutely. And the final two teams, we mentioned them a little bit earlier. Benton Scales Mountain Shullsburg will look to bounce back after losing their game 39-14 to Cuba City, and they will play at Westby. And Peck Argyle fell to Waterloo 36-6. Did get on the board, and they'll travel to Dodgeville. Thoughts on those games? Will either of those teams right the ship?
Unfortunately for Benton Scales Mountain Shullsburg, I think the answer is going to be no. They just, they lost such a great class last year. In fact, they had beaten, Cuba City the year prior, 48-20. That tells you how good they were a year ago, and gave Darlington a heck of a playoff game, if you remember that. But they have 17 kids out, and that is brutal. I mean, it's so hard to field a competitive. They do have some good athletes, but it's hard to compete with 17 kids.
And Westby is not a bad football team either. I mean, they won last week and they look pretty good winning.
Yeah, they're usually pretty high in their conference.
Mm-hmm. Year
in, year out.
Yeah, they're usually one of the better teams of the Cooley Conference, along with Gale Ettrick Trimpolo. They're one of the other conference. Used to be, if you went way up to the top of it, Black River Falls. But Black River Falls is like this. They're up and down and up and down. And recently they've been down. But otherwise, that's not a bad conference.
No. Moving on to the Ridge and Valley Conference. Unfortunately, they did not have a winner in their conference. Had some really tough matchups last week. Played a bunch of really incredibly talented teams that we've discussed a little bit earlier. Highland fell late to River Ridge. Good team. Riverdale lost 6-32 to Southwestern East Dubuque, who we still need to talk about, which we'll get to. Iowa Grant lost 30-12 to Fenimore in the Melcane game. Ithaca dropped week 1 39-6 against a really good Caston team. We spoke a little bit about Wazeeka Steuben Seneca losing to Cassville, and Hillsborough fell to New Lisbon 26-14. And the mighty Basketball Bulldogs put up 12 points. And they fell to Royal 36-12. Like to see the improvement. Thoughts on the games coming up? We will have Wazeeka Steuben Seneca at River Ridge, Ithaca at Potosi Cassville. Basketball will be hosting Southwestern East Dubuque, Riverdale at Waterloo, Hillsborough at Royal, Iowa Grant hosting New Lisbon, and then the Highland Blackhawk Warren match that we talked a little bit about. Thoughts on basketball, the guys?
I would love to think that actually they were going to score points again this next week, maybe even a couple of touchdowns. They might.
I like it.
But I don't think they're going to be Southwestern East Dubuque.
And Southwestern East Dubuque looked really, really good from all the reports that I got. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of close at the half, but they scored 26 answered in the second half to beat Riverdale 32-6. Brady Huseman had 3 plays over 50 yards, including a 70-yard kickoff return. Just a very explosive offense. So, yeah, I would have to tend to agree on the Southwest East Dubuque prediction on that one.
I agree. I saw them scrimmage up at Mineral Point, and they didn't look bad there. So they could be a surprise team to some people.
We think. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, one thing I was thinking about this today about the Ridge and Valley Conference. They were 0 for last week. Last year, they were also 0 for the first week of the season. I think their non-conference record in the first 2 weeks was something like 1-13. They didn't fare very well in the crossover games, most of the crossover games either. You think about it this way. If you're the Ridge and Valley team and you're playing non-conference games, looking to schedule them, there's really only 2 conferences that you're really likely to schedule unless you're really trying to get out of the area. One is obviously the Six Rivers, and we know what kind of physical football that anybody in the Six Rivers plays. And it's really not the case for pretty much any Ridge and Valley team. The other thing is playing the Scenic Bluffs Conference, and the 2 teams that stand out in that conference are Cashton and Bangor, who have been very successful the past 2 years. So if you're a Ridge and Valley coach, there's not really a lot of good directions for you to go. I'm not quite sure how New Lisbon got scheduled, but evidently a couple of teams decided they didn't want to deal with anybody in this immediate area. But the lack of success for Ridge and Valley teams over the past few years is probably a reason why a number of those teams are either going to or are already at either 8-player football or co-ops. In fact, Ithaca is the only team that's not an 8-player team and not a co-op in the Ridge and Valley Conference. That probably helps explain why they're going to become part of the Six Rivers next year.
Absolutely.
If we're looking at this particular game, a game actually I think that's going to be pretty good. Iowa Grande and New Lisbon. I think that's going to be a good football game. Yeah. New Lisbon is not bad, but again, Iowa Grande really isn't that bad either. So that could be, of the 3 games that we haven't really talked about here, that could be the best one. And I think the score could be very close.
And yeah, like I said earlier, the Fenimore Iowa Grande game was close at halftime. Fenimore kind of ran away with it in the second half. They're a solid football team. That should be a really good game. And then finally, we are, last but not least, to the 8-player. The bye week remains undefeated. And as eight-man guys will start their season this Friday. Belmont will get a chance to kick off their season at home against Green Bay Lutheran or Oneida Nation. Thoughts on that game, coaches and Rob?
My thought is real simple. Belmont will come back, I thought, being 1-0. They're playing a team that didn't win a game last year and may not win one this year either. So, and Belmont, they lose good people. They still have good people. So I'm high on Belmont with that game.
Yeah, I know we talked about it in the preview show a couple weeks back, but ever since they dropped to 8-man, they've been successful. Like every single year, they've had winning records, and obviously, 1 year, won the, I guess you would call it the
mythical state championship.
The mythical, yeah, there you go. The mythical state championship, and last year got all the way to the state championship. Do I think they're going to get all the way back? No, but no. I think they're gonna be successful. And I agree with Wally. I think they win this game. I think they start 1-0. They're very young, but they've got, again, good athletes. They're just on the young side. If you wanted to make a comparison maybe to 11-man, much like Cuba City was starting a bunch of sophomores last year who are now very good players as juniors, Belmont's going to be kind of similar to that in the skill position category. They're going to have young but talented players. So, but yeah, I think it'll be enough week one. We'll see how their season unfolds, but I don't expect them to be as nearly as good as last year because they had a remarkable year last year.
There's two good teams in that conference. The other teams are not quite as good, and the other one is DeSoto. And that's how it's going to be really in this year for Belmont is getting out of the conference is can they beat DeSoto? And they did it twice last year. So can they beat them again this year? But otherwise in the conference, I don't see anyone matching up with them.
Absolutely. And again, I don't know. It sounds like a broken record at this point, but I've lived all other places across the Midwest, and the football here is just not comparable, really, especially at this level of the small communities that we have and the way everyone comes together. It's awesome to be able to cover the games like this. And so speaking of games that we are covering, we brought it up earlier, but I'll just go back over them. We have Cuba City at Lancaster on WGLR, Mineral Point at Platteville on Extreme 107, and Wazeeka Steuben Seneca at River Ridge on Super Hits 106. For Wally, Scott, Rob, Steve, and Tom and I, we thank our guests, and we'll try to do better next week.